Imagine, just for a second, that you are totally untethered. You aren't standing on solid ground. You're floating.
Like in space?
Yeah. But I don't want you to picture the empty, star-filled void of actual space. That's way too peaceful for what we're talking about. I want you to imagine you are floating through social space.
Oh, well, that is a much more crowded and arguably much more dangerous environment.
It really is. Because in this social vacuum, you are moving through these massive, totally invisible gravitational fields.
Right.
You've got the gravity of community, the gravity of tradition, the gravity of identity, and most people, at least in this metaphor we're constructing, most people are just planets.
They have mass, they have a stable orbit, they have a completely predictable year.
Exactly. They stick to their own solar system, they know exactly where they belong, they know who circles them, and they know who they circle. It's incredibly predictable.
It's
Very safe. You wake up, the sun rises in the east, you know your neighbors, you know the local customs.
It is a really comfortable place to be, you know. You have gravity, you have an atmosphere that actually supports life, your specific kind of life.
Right.
You don't need a spacesuit because the air is already breathable for you.
Exactly. But then, and this is what we're really getting into today, there are the others. The people who just don't quite stick to one planet.
The outliers.
The outliers. They zip through orbits, they cross trajectories, they bounce between worlds. And as the source material for today's deep dive actually puts it, they occasionally cause a, quote, minor gravitational disturbance at a potluck dinner.
It's the ones who just do not fit the celestial chart.
Right. Or, as we're calling them today, the social asteroids.
I mean, it's a really compelling image. Just a rock hurtling through space, visiting all these different worlds, but fundamentally belonging to none of them.
It is. And it leads us directly to the central question we're grappling with in this deep dive. In a world defined by incredibly strict cultural gravity, where, always attracts, what actually happens to the people who refuse, or maybe you're simply unable to stick to just one planet?
It's such a fascinating question because it immediately moves us away from those usual political shouting matches about identity.
Yeah, definitely.
It touches on sociology, yes, but also economics, psychology, and that very specific visceral anxiety of attending a party where you realize about 10 seconds in that you do not speak the language, literally or metaphorically.
So to guide us through this cosmos, we have a really unique source today. We are looking at a blog post from February 27th, 2026.
This is very current.
Very current. It feels very right now. It's written by a writer named Paramendra, and I gotta say, the title alone tells you we're in for quite a ride.
What exactly are we working with?
Okay, so the title is Netizen, Racism, Racial Math, and the Social Asteroid Theory of Human Interaction.
Wow, okay, that covers a huge amount of ground. Just the phrase racial math is something that immediately makes your ears perk up.
Yeah, it sounds clinical and controversial at the exact same time.
It really does.
And the author describes this piece as a field guide to culture, chemistry, and 20-second verbal combat. And I mean, having read through this entire thing, the tone is really not what you usually get when you click on an article about race or culture.
No, usually those are either, super academic and dry, or they're just very angry and polemical.
Right, exactly. It's different. It's kind of like if you took a rigorous anthropology textbook, mixed it with a stand-up comedy routine, and then just sprinkled in some deep philosophical inquiry about the nature of the soul.
That's quite the mix.
It is. It's incredibly witty, but it uses that wit to disarm you so it can sneak in some genuinely heavy truths.
Which, honestly, is often the best way to handle heavy topics. I mean, if you can make someone laugh about the pure absurdity of social segregation, you create this space where you can actually look at the mechanics of it.
Yeah, without everyone instantly getting their defenses up and retreating to their bunkers.
Exactly.
So, our mission today is to unpack what this author calls a bold anthropological observation. We're going to look closely at the physics of this cultural gravity.
Okay.
We're going to examine the strange best behavior that capitalism forces on us. We'll break down a taxonomy of racism that I honestly think is genuinely useful for anyone navigating the modern world.
It really is.
And finally, we're going to step into the gladiatorial arena of New York City to see how this all plays out in the wild.
And I think it's really important to set the stage here for you, the listener. This isn't just another standard conversation about diversity in the corporate HR sense.
Not at all.
The author frames this as social geometry. It's all about the shapes and lines and forces that move us around, whether we are consciously aware of them or not.
So let's just get straight into the physics of it. Let's talk about this cultural gravity principle. The author starts out with a bit of sarcasm that I think really lands perfectly.
Oh, the opening lines.
Yeah. He says, Let us begin with a bold anthropological observation. People tend to hang out with people like themselves.
Stop the presses. Groundbreaking news right there.
I know, right? He writes, call the universities. Shut down the sociology departments. We have cracked the code.
It is funny because it is so incredibly obvious, but we often treat it like it's some sort of massive societal failure.
How do you mean?
Well, we look at a high school cafeteria where all the kids of one specific background are sitting together at one table, and we think, oh no, multiculturalism has failed. We've totally failed to integrate.
Right, it becomes this panic point.
Exactly. But the author is pointing out that this is actually just the baseline default setting for the human species.
And he gives these really specific, vivid examples to prove that this isn't just about one particular group. He talks about Indians who have been in America for decades.
Yes.
He says they've mastered the survival technique of having Indian friends. They go to Indian parties, they eat Indian food, they argue passionately about cricket. And then there's this one detail that I just loved. He says they complain about mango prices.
See, that detail right there about the mango prices is actually a really key insight.
Why does that stand out to you?
Because it seems like just a throwaway joke.
Right?
But think about what it actually signifies to complain about that specifically.
Okay, break that down.
To complain about the price of a mango, you need a shared economic and cultural baseline. You both need to know what a mango should actually cost in a normal world.
Right, you need context.
Exactly. You both need to know what a good mango tastes like, probably referencing the Alfonso mangoes back home in India. You have to value the mango enough to be genuinely annoyed by the inflation on it.
Ah.
It completely signifies a shared depth of context. You really can't complain about the price of a culturally significant fruit with someone who thinks a mango is just, some generic orange blob you throw in a breakfast smoothie.
That is such a great point. It's really a shorthand for an entire value system. It's a secret code. Saying that mango is too expensive actually translates to, I remember how things used to be, and I know that you do too.
Exactly. It's profound mutual recognition. And the author points out the pure universality of this. It isn't just Indians doing this.
No, Italians do it.
Nigerians do it.
Texans absolutely do it.
Oh, for sure.
If you put two Texans in a room in the middle of Tokyo, I guarantee you within 5 minutes they are talking about smoked brisket or high school football. It's just inevitable.
It is the cultural gravity principle in full action. The text defines this very, very clearly. It says, the larger identity wins.
We really do like to think of ourselves as these completely autonomous individuals, don't we?
We do. We like to think we're drifting freely, making every choice based purely on our unique individual personalities.
But the source completely argues against that. It argues that culture has real gravity, language has gravity, food has massive gravity, religion has gravity.
These are massive, dense bodies of mass that just pull us right in.
It's literal physics in social form. If you are a small object, you get pulled toward the massive object. There's this great line in the text where he says, you can be the most open-minded, globally enlightened, TED Talk watching human alive, but when someone says, we made biryani, your DNA lights up like a Diwali festival.
That metaphor of the DNA lighting up is incredibly profound if you actually sit with it for a minute.
Tell me more about that.
It suggests that this isn't really a conscious choice you're making. It's not a political statement. It is a biological, deeply historical resonance.
It almost sounds like he's describing a profound sense of relief.
That's exactly what it is. It's relief, it's comfort. That is what gravity provides for us. It provides orientation.
Because you know which way is down.
Right. When you are with people who share your gravity, you don't have to explain your pop culture references. You don't have to endlessly translate your values. You don't have to apologize for the smell of your lunch in the break room. You can just be.
The cognitive load just completely drops.
Yes. You aren't processing every interaction. You are just simply existing.
But then, of course, right after setting all this up, he targets the one specific group of people that claims they don't actually do this.
Ah, yes. The colorblind crew.
The people who love to start sentences with, well, I don't see culture, or I just see people. The author's pretty savage about this whole mindset.
He is.
He basically implies that that statement is a lie, or at the very least, a fairly significant delusion.
Well, he uses literal math to dismantle it. This is where the racial math part of the title comes directly into play. He poses a really clear, hypothetical scenario for you to think about.
Okay.
He says, imagine you move to a new town, and in this town, there are 3,000 Indians and exactly 20 Bulgarians.
Okay. 3,000 to 20, that is quite the ratio.
Now, just look at the social dynamics that will inevitably form.
Oh,
The Bulgarians are not going to be dominating the WhatsApp groups of the Indians.
right. They aren't going to suddenly become the admins of the Desi Cricket fan club.
Exactly. And the author's main point here is that is not racism. That is just pure statistics. That is probability at work.
The math just dictates it.
Yes, the Bulgarians are naturally going to find the other Bulgarians because that is where the gravity is strongest for them.
And they need it.
They need it desperately. If you are one of only 20, you need that gravity even more than the 3,000 do. The author is really trying to destigmatize this natural clustering of humans. He's saying, please stop pretending this clustering is some sort of moral failing. It's just math.
It's so interesting because society often pathologizes that exact behavior. We say things like, oh, they're being clannish, or they refuse to assimilate.
Constantly.
But this perspective completely flips it and says, no, they're just actively seeking gravitational equilibrium.
Precisely. And if you are a social asteroid, you absolutely have to understand this math before you can successfully navigate any room you walk into.
So if that is the norm, if
Yeah.
the undisputed norm is planets constantly orbiting their own suns, pulled in by the gravity of mangoes and cricket and shared language, then we have to talk about the anomaly. We really have to talk about the social asteroid.
This is where the social geometry gets super interesting. Because not everyone actually has a sun. Not everyone has a clear, defined solar system they belong to.
The author clearly defines himself as this social asteroid. He describes it as zipping through orbits, crossing trajectories. It is this perpetual feeling of never quite landing anywhere permanently.
It is a very specific, fairly common psychological profile nowadays. It's the core experience of the third culture kid or the immigrant who doesn't quite fit the traditional mold of the old country or the new one.
Or maybe just someone who grew up in a very eclectic, mixed household.
Yes. The text describes this feeling of displacement just perfectly. He says, we show up at Indian gatherings feeling vaguely Bulgarian. We show up at American gatherings feeling vaguely anthropological.
Vaguely anthropological. I just love that phrasing. It so perfectly captures that feeling of distance.
It's the distinct feeling of being a spy in your own actual life.
A spy.
Yeah, you are there, you are participating, you are eating the food and laughing at the jokes, but part of your brain is quietly taking notes. You are observing the customs, suddenly realizing that you don't fully belong to the hive mind.
You know all the passwords, but you don't really believe in the religion.
That's a great way to put it.
He calls this specific state of being cultural Switzerland with Wi-Fi. I think we need to unpack that metaphor because it is incredibly dense. Switzerland with Wi-Fi.
Well, just think about Switzerland for a second. Historically, on the global stage, what is it?
It's neutral. It deliberately stays out of the wars. It provides banking for everyone, but it fights for absolutely no one.
Exactly. It's not part of the conflict. It is not taking sides in any tribal battles. So the social asteroid operates as neutral territory. They don't have that fierce, blinding loyalty to one specific planet.
Okay, so that's the Switzerland part, but what about the Wi-Fi part? That's the real twist here.
Right, because Switzerland is traditionally isolated up in the mountains, closed off. But this person, the asteroid, they are plugged into absolutely everything.
So you are neutral, but you are extremely high bandwidth.
Yes. You are deeply connected to all the groups, but you aren't actually of the groups. You can quickly download the data from the Indian group, the American group, the corporate group, the artist group, but you don't store your core data exclusively on any of their servers.
You are a router, not a hard drive.
That is exactly it. You're routing information, translating it, but not keeping it as your sole identity.
You're an active observer just sitting in the corner of this grand social geometry. And I really think a lot of you listening right now might relate to that very specific feeling of being at a dinner party and suddenly realizing, wait a second, everyone else here shares an invisible script that I haven't actually read.
Or maybe you have read the script, but you only read it in translation, whereas everyone else in the room just naturally speaks it natively.
Right. It takes effort for you, but it's effortless for them.
Right.
Now, speaking of scripts and expected behavior, the source takes a truly fascinating turn right about here.
It really shifts gears.
It does. It moves from this internal psychological feeling of belonging to a very external structural observation about how we actually treat each other out in the world. And it ends up crediting a very unlikely hero for creating moments of racial harmony.
I was genuinely surprised by this part.
Yeah.
It's a pivot I definitely did not expect from this kind of essay.
Capitalism. The author calls this section Capitalism as a cure for bigotry.
Now, we do have to be a little careful here, because he is being very, very specific with his terms. He isn't saying capitalism magically fixes the human heart.
No, not at all.
He isn't claiming the free market somehow makes us love each other or want to hold hands and sing songs together. He's saying it fixes the behavior.
Let's set the exact scene he describes to explain this because it grounds it perfectly. It's a medical clinic.
Okay.
You have a local Indian doctor, and you have a white patient. Now, culturally, historically, and maybe even politically, these two individuals might have absolutely nothing in common.
Right. In a purely social setting, maybe there's instant friction. Maybe they vote for totally different parties. Maybe they worship completely differently.
But inside the clinic,
Best behavior mode is instantly activated.
it becomes a ritual, doesn't it? He describes the insurance cards being exchanged with ceremonial dignity,
Ceremonial dignity.
and the copay being paid with the solemnity of a peace treaty.
It is funny, but it is also structurally undeniably true. The rigid structure of the economic transaction forces a very specific kind of mutual respect.
Because everyone knows their lines.
Exactly. The doctor is the designated expert. The patient is the designated customer. Both of those roles have strict, predefined scripts of politeness. You simply cannot deviate from the script without breaking the entire transaction.
The author writes, nothing says unity like a properly processed invoice.
Yeah.
I mean, that is such a cynical but deeply hilarious line. No racism, no drama, just billing.
And that is the strange truth he's really getting at here. Capitalism essentially creates this neutral ground where the only color that truly matters is green, or, whatever color the local currency happens to be.
It temporarily suspends bigotry.
It does, because bigotry is highly inefficient. Bigotry is fundamentally bad for business. If you are the doctor, you need that patient to pay your mortgage. If you are the patient, you desperately need the cure to stay alive.
It's a highly functional peace. It is a truce.
Exactly. It is a truce strictly enforced by mutual need.
But you have to ask, is that enough? Is a truce enough?
That really is the ultimate question here. The author presents it as a positive thing, capitalism as a cure. But there's definitely an underlying melancholy to the whole idea.
Yeah, you can feel it in the writing.
It recognizes the sad reality that we might not be able to actually love each other, but hey, we can at least trade safely with each other.
It definitely beats open conflict, certainly.
It does. But we have to actively recognize the massive difference between a transactional piece and actual human connection. The clinic scenario is safe purely because it's scripted. Once you leave the clinic, once you take away the invoice, the insurance card, the structure, that is where the real work actually begins.
And that brings us directly to the messiest, most chaotic, unscripted area of human interaction possible.
Oh, dating.
Dating. The author transitions to what he brilliantly calls the 7 lifetimes dating plan.
This section honestly made me laugh out loud, but it's also deeply, deeply observant about how culture fundamentally impacts romance.
He pivots entirely to interpersonal chemistry. He calls true chemistry a rare mystical phenomenon, and he contrasts the typical Western view of love with the traditional Hindu view.
Right. In the West, the overarching narrative is that true love is basically a lightning strike. It happens maybe once or twice in an entire lifetime. It's special precisely because it is so incredibly rare. You have to hunt for it.
But the Hindu view,
Relax. It's the exact same couple over 7 lifetimes.
which just puts a whole different spin on normal relationship problems.
Oh, totally. The author says, imagine finally resolving an intense argument about who forgot to buy the milk in your 5th reincarnation.
I told you in the 17th century to pick up the milk, and here we are again. I can't believe we wasted the entire Mughal Empire arguing about this, and now we're doing it in a grocery store in New Jersey.
It is both incredibly romantic and, as he accurately notes, slightly exhausting. It heavily implies you can never really escape your partner. You are cosmically, unavoidably bound.
But the underlying point he is making with this joke actually connects right back to that cultural gravity we discussed earlier. He argues that deep, genuine chemistry is rare, and purely because it is so rare, shared culture becomes a massive efficiency hack for relationships.
It's all about probability again, the math of dating. If you are actively looking for a partner, having a shared culture drastically increases your baseline odds of compatibility. He breaks this efficiency down into 2 main factors, fluency and speed.
Let's really look at those 2 factors. Fluency seems pretty obvious right off the bat. It's shared language.
It is, but it's significantly more than just having the same vocabulary. It's about nuance. It's about not having to constantly struggle to find the exact right word to describe an emotion.
Right.
It's about the deep emotional weight of certain words. If we share the same mother tongue, I can convey a highly complex feeling to you in maybe 3 words. If we don't, I might need 3 paragraphs, and even then, you still might not quite catch the exact flavor of what I'm feeling.
It's the difference between seeing something in high definition versus standard resolution.
Exactly.
And then there is speed. He argues that shared references equal speed.
The speed is absolutely crucial in humor and in building intimacy. If I make a joke and I have to stop and explain exactly why a reference to a specific 90s cartoon is funny, the moment is completely dead.
The joke just flatlines.
Humor relies entirely on timing, and having to pause for translation completely kills timing.
He actually defines intimacy using this exact concept. He says intimacy is when someone laughs at your childhood cartoon reference without needing any explanation.
That is such a small, hyper-specific thing, but it is so deeply real. Think about it for a second. When someone instantly gets that niche reference, what are they actually saying to you?
What are you saying?
They are saying, I was there too. I watched the exact same screen. I absorbed the exact same cultural programming. I fundamentally understand the texture of your reality.
It validates your entire history. It makes you feel truly seen, not just intellectually understood.
It really does. And for the social asteroid, the person who doesn't fully fit into just one standard box, that kind of effortless intimacy can be incredibly hard to find out in the wild.
Because your references are a totally weird mix.
Exactly. You might instinctively quote a Bollywood movie in one breath and then pivot to quoting The Simpsons in the very next breath. You desperately need someone who has a compatible mix, or at the very least someone who is genuinely curious enough to learn your specific mix. And statistically speaking, that is rare.
It completely explains why the asteroid can feel so intensely lonely, even when they are completely surrounded by people.
Exactly. You can have dozens of friends, you can have great colleagues, but finding that one person who fluently speaks your specific creole of cultural references, that is the holy grail.
So we have covered where we naturally fit in. That's the gravity. We've covered how we safely transact with strangers. That's capitalism. And we've covered how we find love. That's chemistry. Now we really have to go into the dark side of this geometry.
We do.
We have to talk about what happens when things go seriously wrong. The source material shifts gears significantly here to give us a detailed taxonomy of racism.
This is really the field guide part of the title.
Yeah.
And he starts this section by clarifying exactly what racism is not. This is a very important distinction he lays down right away. He says, racism is not liking biryani.
I feel like that is a very direct shot at the rather shallow way we tend to talk about culture online sometimes. People seem to constantly conflate cultural appreciation, or even just consumption, with actually solving racism. Like, I love eating tacos, so obviously I can't be anti-Mexican.
Right. The author is sternly saying, consumption is incredibly easy. Genuine respect is hard. Just because you eagerly eat the food does not mean you respect the humanity of the people who actually made it.
You can love the product and completely despise the producer.
Exactly. He goes on to define racism very, very viscerally. He says it is emotional violence, it is lazy assumption, it is casual dismissal.
The core metaphor he uses here is just brutal. He says, it's the casual remark that pretends to be a joke but lands like a paper cut dipped in lemon juice.
That image. Paper cut dipped in lemon juice.
Yeah.
It just perfectly captures the specific sting. It isn't necessarily a massive gunshot wound. It's small. It's often entirely invisible to everyone else in the room, but it really burns.
And it lingers.
It lingers. It is a constant irritant that reminds you over and over that you are perceived as different.
He breaks racism down into 3 specific flavors, and I think this particular framework is genuinely practically helpful for anyone out there trying to figure out how to mentally process and react in these situations. Let's look closely at flavor number 1, the ignorant kind.
This is the, oops, I genuinely didn't realize that was offensive, variety.
He uses a tech analogy here that works really beautifully. He says we are all walking around with outdated software in certain parts of our brains.
I really like this analogy because it fundamentally assumes innocence, or at least a baseline lack of active malice. It suggests that the person making the comment isn't inherently evil. They just simply haven't downloaded the 2026 social update yet.
Right, they're running on Windows 95 definitions of culture.
Yes. They are using terms their grandfather routinely used, not fully realizing the rest of the world has moved on.
And purely because it's framed as software, the direct implication is that it's highly fixable. You don't throw out the whole computer, you just run the update.
Exactly. You talk to them, you clarify, you gently say, hey, that term isn't really used anymore, or, that joke actually lands kind of weirdly. And the person, if they are truly just ignorant and not malicious, will usually say, oh, wow, I completely didn't mean that. I just didn't know.
And then, crucially, the text says, everyone upgrades their firmware. The relationship deepens. Humanity peacefully continues. This is the optimistic path. It heavily assumes that people generally want to be good, they just currently lack the right data.
It is a very forgiving, productive approach. It actively allows space for growth.
But then, unfortunately, there is flavor number 2, the fragile peacock.
The fragile peacock. This is a very specific, very recognizable archetype. I think we have all, unfortunately, met this person.
Well, absolutely we have.
He perfectly sets the scene. You are at a crowded party. You haven't even found the samosas yet. You are just trying to get a drink and settle in. And the very first person you meet aggressively launches into a casual racist comment trademark. It's a bizarre icebreaker.
It's that truly strange phenomenon where someone deliberately uses shock value or leans hard into a stereotype to try and quickly bond with you. They genuinely think they are being edgy or funny. They think, I'll make a slightly off-color joke about your background to prove I'm totally comfortable with it.
But they misread the room entirely. They misread you entirely.
So what do you actually do? If you are the social asteroid in this scenario, what is the recommended protocol?
The text is very clear on this point. You do not fight. You don't scream. You don't launch into a massive lecture. He says, the social asteroid gently pushes back, not aggressively, just a slight nudge, declining the premise.
Declining the premise, like, I'm simply not going to play this particular game with you.
Right. You just don't laugh at the joke. Or you simply say, mildly, I don't really think that's accurate.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where the peacock part comes in, the reaction. The author brilliantly describes this fragility as having a smoke detector in your ego.
I love that image so much, the ego smoke detector.
It goes off violently just because someone else exists differently in the same space. You didn't start a fire, you didn't verbally attack them, you just walked into the room, heard the joke, and didn't laugh. And suddenly, beep, 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 the ego is sounding the massive alarm. I am being attacked. My entire worldview is being threatened. Why aren't they laughing at my brilliant joke?
And the result of that alarm, the peacock just deflates. They rapidly vacate the space. He jokingly calls it anthropology in motion.
It is a phenomenal power move to just not engage with the toxicity, to just let it sit there and awkwardly rot in the air between you. It completely denies them the fuel they were desperately looking for.
They wanted a reaction or they wanted complicit validation.
And you gave them absolutely neither. You just gave them a blank mirror. And usually they really don't like what they see in that mirror, so they just abruptly leave.
Which brings us to flavor number 3, the scary one, the sinister slow burn.
This is the one that genuinely gave me chills reading it because it is not immediate. It creeps up on you.
The author describes this as the person who gets more racist as they get more comfortable with you.
It's the catastrophic mistake of familiarity. They think, oh, we are real friends now. I've known you for 6 months, so now I can finally say the things I really think behind closed doors. Now I can tell you what I really think about, quote unquote, those people.
They fundamentally mistake your quiet presence for permission. They think that because you are cool, you are automatically an accomplice.
Exactly. They think you are one of the good ones so they can comfortably share their deepest bigotry with you. It's a massive betrayal, really, because you truly thought you were building a solid friendship and they were just patiently building a safe platform for their prejudice.
The metaphor he uses here is a weather forecast. You can clearly see the storm coming on the radar. The author writes, at this rate, we're about 6 months from a headline.
That is a terrifying thought to have about someone you know. You are actively watching someone's trajectory, the little offhand comments, the subtle side eyes, the coded jokes, and suddenly realizing it inevitably ends somewhere very, very bad. It ends in a messy lawsuit or a viral video or actual physical violence.
And the strategy here is drastically different. The strategy isn't to patiently upgrade their firmware. It isn't to gently nudge them to decline the premise.
No.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot upgrade this specific software. The operating system is fully corrupted. The root code is just rotten.
The strategy he gives is simple. Make a mental note to stand far, far away.
It's pure self-preservation. The smart social asteroid knows exactly when to orbit smoothly and knows exactly when to fire up their thrusters and fly away at maximum speed.
Yeah.
He simply cannot save everyone.
So we have outlined the major types of racism. Now, let's talk about where this all actually happens, because the fundamental physics of interaction change wildly depending on the geography.
They really do.
The author draws a very sharp, deliberate contrast between the small town and the completely unforgiving gladiatorial arena of New York City.
This is a classic sociological distinction, but he manages to put a very modern, sharp spin on it. It's really a deep dive into accountability versus pure anonymity.
Right. In a small town, there is a very rapid calculation that happens before anyone misbehaves in public.
You have to run the mental checklist instantly. Do I know their cousin? Will I bump into them at Costco on Saturday? Is this person somehow secretly my dentist?
The strict accountability is just permanently built right into the landscape. You literally cannot afford to be a jerk because you will inevitably have to see that exact same person while buying bulk toilet paper next Tuesday afternoon.
It forcefully creates a baseline of civility. Not necessarily because people in small towns are magically nicer deep down in their souls, but purely because the social cost of being mean is exponentially higher.
The social tax is completely immediate.
Exactly. If you lose your temper and scream to the dentist in a small town, the entire town knows by noon.
But then there is NYC.
The arena.
The arena. The author clearly has this intense love-hate relationship with New York City. He vividly describes the stakes. He says, "You will never see this person again. Ever."
Absolute pure anonymity that instantly removes all the traditional safety rails. If I decide to scream at you on the subway, there are absolutely zero social consequences for me tomorrow. I will just disappear back into the crowd. I am essentially a ghost.
And this total lack of consequence creates a very specific window. He calls it 20 seconds to glory. He describes it as this fleeting opportunity for a brutal verbal takedown.
But notice the strict rules of engagement he lays out for this. This is highly civilized urban combat. He says no fists, no threats, just vocabulary.
An impeccably timed verbal takedown. He said it's at Broadway, but with microaggressions.
It heavily suggests that in the city, wit is your only real weapon. You don't have the warm social pressure of the small town to passively protect you, so you have to actively protect yourself with your intellect and your sheer speed. You have to literally out-talk the crazy.
And the absolute best part of this whole NYC scenario, the audience.
Indifferent pigeons.
That image just completely cracked me up. Indifferent pigeons. The massive city simply does not care about your triumph.
It's deeply existential, really. Think about it. You could confidently deliver the greatest, most eloquent monologue against injustice in human history. You could utterly crush your opponent with the most perfect retort ever constructed. And the pigeon is just going to casually peck at a dirty crust of bread and slowly fly away. It severely puts our little human dramas into perspective.
It's very humbling. We are out there fighting these massive internal battles of identity and dignity, and the universe, perfectly represented by the filthy pigeon, is largely indifferent.
It reminds us that the actual meaning of the interaction comes entirely from us, inside our own heads, not from the external environment validating us.
So if the pigeons don't care at all, and the small-town neighbors only care because they are financially or socially forced to, why actually be good? Why be moral at all? If gravity naturally pulls us safely to our own kind, and big city anonymity safely lets us be complete jerks to everyone else, what is the actual logical argument for being a decent human being across these diverse lines?
This brings us directly to what he calls the scripture clause.
This is the massive philosophical twist right near the end of the post. The author suddenly invokes major world scriptures, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita.
He points out a truly radical assumption embedded in these ancient texts. We often completely miss it because we are so culturally used to hearing it. But these texts aggressively assume that your basic moral obligations do not stop at your culture boundary.
I love the yogurt exemption he mentions here to illustrate this. He says, you don't get a special exemption that says, be kind, unless they pronounce yogurt differently.
It sounds like a joke, but historically speaking, that is exactly how humans have operated for millennia. We are incredibly kind to our immediate tribe, and we are violently suspicious of the other. That is our standard evolutionary default.
Right.
The author is arguing that the true core of these massive spiritual traditions, and frankly, the core of modern humanism, is the command to consciously override that tribal instinct.
The core argument boils down to this. Good behavior is meant to operate at the human level, full stop.
And that truly is a radical idea when you measure it against physics. It heavily challenges that cultural gravity we talked about right at the beginning.
How so?
Well, gravity naturally, effortlessly pulls you toward your own kind. It takes immense effort. It takes massive emotional energy to actively escape that gravity and intentionally extend grace to someone floating in a completely different orbit. It's technically unnatural in a pure physics sense, but it is absolutely essential in a moral sense.
So we have comprehensively traversed the galaxy of human interaction here. We've seen the planets, we've measured the gravity, we've avoided the black holes of racism, we've navigated the transaction of the clinic. Now we have to actually land this asteroid. How does the author finally conclude this field guide?
He summarizes the entire landscape for us. He gives us a rapid-fire recap. People cluster. Culture has massive gravity. Deep chemistry is rare. Basic ignorance is fixable. Ego fragility can be exposed. And sinister intent should be avoided at all costs.
It reads like a survival list, a mandatory checklist for the modern social astronaut.
It really does. But then he brings it all safely back to the fundamental role of the social asteroid.
The people constantly zipping across these rigid communities, he says, we attend parties where we are one of 20. We seamlessly cross languages mid-sentence. We actively test whether these moral frameworks actually apply across real differences.
That is a surprisingly heavy burden, isn't it? To constantly be the tester, to be the one repeatedly crashing into strange new atmospheres just to see if they burn you up or actually let you land safely.
It is. But the real punchline, as he explicitly calls it, is actually a deeply optimistic one. And I really think this is the absolute key takeaway for you, our listeners. He says, the more individually diverse we are, the easier it should be to understand collective diversity.
I absolutely love this argument. It is the weirdness argument.
Break that down for us a bit more.
Well, just look at yourself. You, the person listening to this right now. You definitely have weird hobbies. Maybe you passionately like obscure jazz and you obsessively collect vintage stamps and you inexplicably eat pizza with a fork. You are a complete bundle of bizarre contradictions. You are fundamentally weird.
We are all undeniably weird.
Exactly. So if you can openly accept that you are weird, that you have your own baffling quirks, your own strange daily habits, your own highly specific way of existing, then it really shouldn't be so incredibly shocking that entire cultures have quirks too.
Right.
It shouldn't be terrifying or threatening that a group of people from across the world does things fundamentally differently than you do.
It completely shifts the mental frame from they are weird and I am the normal baseline to, hey, we're all just weird in totally different, interesting ways.
Exactly. It completely democratizes weirdness.
He gives a working definition of maturity right here that I honestly think we should all write down on a sticky note and stick on our bathroom mirrors. He writes, maturity is recognizing difference without turning it into hierarchy.
That is the absolute key to everything we've discussed. Recognizing difference is incredibly easy. We do that totally automatically. That's the cultural gravity pulling on us. I can instantly see that you are different from me.
But the next step is the trap.
Right. Not turning it into hierarchy, not instantly saying, my gravity is better than your gravity, or my mango is objectively better than your mango, or my God is better than your God. That is the actual hard work. That is true maturity.
And for the social asteroid out there navigating all this, what is the final parting advice? When you inevitably encounter that sinister type, when you hit the extreme turbulence of a new orbit,
He says, smile politely. Adjust your orbital path and let the asteroid continue zipping beautifully through social space.
just keep moving. Don't let yourself get sucked into the black hole.
Exactly. Perpetual motion is life for the asteroid.
This has just been such an incredible journey. I mean, we started with the Diwali Festival of DNA, and we somehow ended up with adjusting our orbital paths around indifferent pigeons.
It is a genuinely powerful framework. It takes the extremely heavy, often incredibly toxic subject of racism and social belonging and effectively turns it into a study of physics.
It makes it feel manageable.
It does. It makes it navigable. It completely stops being about endless guilt and starts being about practical navigation.
And importantly, it gives a proper name to that lingering feeling so many of us actually have, that persistent feeling of being an asteroid. It actively validates the quiet observer, the outsider, the specific person who constantly connects the dots between isolated worlds.
Because the social asteroid is actually a vital, necessary part of the entire system. Think about it for a second. Without the speeding asteroids, the massive planets would simply never interact. We would all just be totally isolated spheres, blindly spinning in the dark.
The cross-pollination would stop.
Yes. The asteroids actually carry the data. They carry the stories between the worlds. They carry the pure possibility of unexpected connection. They are the essential pollinators of the social galaxy.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, here is our final provocative thought for you to chew on as you continue your own specific orbit today. We've talked a lot about upgrading our firmware when we inevitably make mistakes. We've talked deeply about the best behavior mode of the clinic transaction.
Yeah.
I want you to really think about your last week. Think critically about the specific interactions you had with people who exist outside your home planet. Were you actively trying to upgrade your firmware? Were you genuinely curious? Were you actively learning? Were you truly trying to connect? Or, and be honest, were you just relying on the best behavior mode of a basic transaction to easily get by? Were you just quietly processing the invoice?
That is a tough question. Are you actively building a sturdy bridge, or are you just quickly paying the toll and driving off?
Ooh, yeah, that is exactly it. Are you a social asteroid deliberately making meaningful contact, or are you just a cold rock passing silently in the night? Take some time to really identify your own orbital paths, and maybe, just maybe, consciously try to land on a completely new planet once in a while.
Just remember to watch out for the indifferent pigeons.
Always watch out for the pigeons. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us.
See you on the next orbit.